Hi guys, it's Quinn here. If you enjoy my videos, consider hitting the like button. It's the only way the YouTube algorithm really notices me. The technical term for modern humans is Homo Sapiens Sapiens. We are the current iteration of a genus going back 2 million years. There were, however, obviously many species of humans who did not go on, who for whatever reason could not adapt to their environments well enough to carry on their DNA. Examples include Homo Neanderthalensis, Homo Erectus, and Homo Floresiensis. Peter Watts, in his novel Blindsight, merely adds an additional species to that list. They evolved in a different way, the wrong way. This particular species of humans lacked the ability to synthesize the protein protocadherin Y, which other species of humans produced naturally. Their brains and bodies were different as well. They were smarter, stronger, and faster than other humans. And in earlier eras of humanity, when myth and legend were still being formed, they preyed upon us in the night. Ancient humanity was only able to drive them to extinction when they discovered that the creatures had an aversion to right angles. This trait had developed naturally through some fluke of genetics. It was seemingly neutral at first, as right angles do not form very often in nature. But once this fact was revealed to humanity, they drove them back into the darkness, seemingly forever, until many eons later, when science brought them back. In the age of space exploration, humans needed to find a way to be able to survive the necessary conditions for long-term hibernation in space. For this reason, they resurrected the vampires, though they did not repair the gene which gave them their aversion to right angles, the crucifix glitch. It is mentioned that they could have if they wanted to. They extracted the traits which gave them the potential for long-term hibernation and gave it to certain humans who would travel in deep space. Blindsight follows the crew of the spacecraft Theseus, all of which are human hybrids except one, their leader, Saresti, who was a vampire. The crew understood that if he so chose, he could prey upon them at any time. This created tension. They knew that the psychology of vampires had to be different from their own, and the back and forth of whether or not humanity can trust the resurrected vampires definitely adds to the uneasy feeling of the book. Vampires had to be sociopaths. They're too much like their own prey. A lot of taxonomists don't even consider them a subspecies, you know that? Never diverged far enough for reproductive isolation, so maybe they're more syndrome than race, just a bunch of obligate cannibals with a consistent set of deformities. And how does that make? If the only thing you can eat is your own kind, empathy is going to be the first thing that goes. Psychopathy's no disorder in those shoes, eh? Just a survival strategy, but they still make our skin crawl, so we chain them up. You think we should have repaired the crucifix glitch? Everyone knew why we hadn't. Only a fool would resurrect a monster without safeguards in place. Vampires like Saresti had to constantly take anti-Euclideans, which kept them from short-circuiting in the presence of right angles. Saresti also hides a lot, and he's only ever really seen when he needs to be seen. The other crew members of Theseus can't tell if this is because he knows that he makes them nervous, or because the vampire doesn't fully trust himself around them. Either way, it's somewhat unnerving when also added to the fact that Saresti has the tendency to seemingly appear out of nowhere. The actual reason Saresti hides likely goes back to primitive instinct. In the early days of mankind, when his kind stalked us in the night, they did it from the shadows. He hid and waited because it was his nature to hide and wait, and that was the nature of all the vampires that get resurrected. It wasn't just Saresti. They all hid from us. Even when they had the upper hand, they always stayed just the other side of myth. It started pretty much the same way it did for anything else. Vampires were far from the first to learn the virtues of energy conservation. Shrews and hummingbirds, saddled with tiny bodies and overclocked metabolic engines, would have starved to death overnight if not for the torpor that overtook them at sundown. Comatose elephant seals lurked breathless at the bottom of the sea, rousing only for passing prey or red-line lactate levels. Bears and chipmunks cut costs by sleeping away the impoverished winter months, and longfish, Devonian black belts in the art of estivation, could curl up and die for years, waiting for the rains. With vampires, it was little different. It wasn't shortness of breath, or metabolic overdrive, or some blanket of snow that locked the pantry every winter. The problem wasn't so much a lack of prey, as a difference from it. Vampires were such a recent split from the ancestral baseline that the reproductive rates hadn't diverged. This was no woodland variety lynx hare dynamic, where prey outnumbered predators 100 to 1. Vampires fed on things that bred barely faster than they did. They would have wiped out their own food supply in no time if they hadn't learned how to ease off on the throttle. By the time they went extinct, they'd learned to shut down for decades. It made two kinds of sense. It not only slashed their metabolic needs while prey bred itself back to harvestable levels, it gave us time to forget that we were prey. We were so smart by the Pleistocene, smart enough for easy skepticism. If you haven't seen any night-stalking demons in all your years on the savannah, why would you believe some senile campfire ramblings passed down by your mother's mother? It was murder on our ancestors. Even if those same enemy genes co-opted now served us so well when we left the sun 50,000 years later. But it was almost heartening, I guess, to think that maybe Saresti felt the tug of other genes, some aversion to prolonged visibility shaped by generations of natural selection. Maybe he spent every moment in our company fighting voices that urged him to hide, let them forget. I really enjoy the interpretation of vampires in this book. Typically, vampires are depicted in the vein of Bram Stoker and have supernatural elements to them. I appreciate Watts's science fiction explanation for vampires because for me that makes it creepier. Also, I find the description of earlier humanity living in a world where vampires would sleep for decades only to be reawakened after humans had forgotten to be truly creepy. The lore Watt sets up surrounding vampires and the history of their genetics is extremely compelling, and I honestly wish there was more of it in the book. But the mere fact that a vampire is on the crew of Theseus helps to elevate the other horror elements of this book. The crew of Theseus itself are the first crewed mission sent to learn more about the alien race, which had scanned the Earth suddenly and vanished years ago. The ominous atmosphere set up by this book is extremely impressive, and that's due to the combination of the tension between Saresti and the crew, and due to their mysterious interactions with the alien vessel, which speaks to them using a human voice. Now, just in case you missed it, earlier I put out this video on the Blindsight where I go deeper into the main theme of the book, the necessity of consciousness. If you like these kinds of videos on science fiction books, check out my channel, and make sure you like and subscribe for more Quinn's ideas. Just a heads up for those of you that may be interested, my next graphic novel, The Lie Behind the Star, is launching February 2023. You can sign up now to get on the email mailing list to get notified as soon as it launches. More information on my website, link in the description. Thank you guys so much.